I just decided to start basically, and I always tell entrepreneurs that the hardest part is actually starting and really putting yourself out there. Starting a business is very vulnerable because you also are opening yourself up to a lot of criticism if you don't succeed.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of New York 100. Thank you for clicking through to that video. So, I know you're a business owner or entrepreneur, startup, solopreneur, whatever phase you're in. Thank you for clicking through this video because we're really going to give you the ins and outs of some of the legal issues that most companies have and how to overcome them. And so, listen, first off, I've been in business for about like five years now, right? And I started to see how when I first got started, my problems were about the craft, about building the service, about building the product. Then it was about learning how to do business, how to work with people, customer service, how to serve customers, maybe short-term, long-term contracts. And then over time, I started to see that my problems started to become more of a legal thing, right? Like the contracts, the invoices, the emails, communicating with customers, all these things I started learning that, okay, these are actually legal issues that I'm actually diving into, right? So that's when I knew it was very important to dive into the legal side. So if you're watching this right now, very smart person, thank you for clicking through. So I know I'm in the media business. I'm not sure what your business is in particular. So we're gonna go through some of the general concepts that both, I guess, solopreneurs and startups have, right? So today I'm sitting with someone who has a breadth of experience in the legal field. Shermin.
Hello.
Shermin, thank you for sitting with us and appreciate you coming and stopping by. You have a lot of experience with startups, entrepreneurs, but first off, like, before I even say anything, legal disclaimer, everything we're about to say in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So back to you, Shermin. So how did you actually get started in law? Can you take us back to, first off, what drew you to law?
Sure. Another good disclaimer, this is not legal advice.
Okay, great.
So what drew me to law is when I was at university, I always had an interest in writing and I was a major in literature. I actually kind of backed into going to law school, so I knew I wanted an advanced degree. And so when I was in my junior year, I took the LSAT and I went to law school. It's probably one of the better decisions of my life. I think when I first got into law school, or when I was in the process of going to law school, there's a lot of people in my ear, and I'm sure any of you who are listening who are law students are thinking about law school or hearing this as well. Things like, oh, it's so much money, oh, it's so difficult, oh, it's so competitive, but I'm really glad that I did go, and I see now that it really helped me get into what I'm most passionate about, which is being a startup owner, being a female founder, and also providing legal advice to the same sorts of businesses.
Now, there is a lot of flack about university. In fact, so I have like a segment that's new to my channel. It's called Ask Amadeus. And someone asked me, do people still need to go to university, essentially, right? So, or college. So what are some of the things outside of the actual technical skill set or of being a lawyer and the things you had to study? What are some of the soft things or the things that you applied from university? Let's create an argument for university for 1 second.
Yeah, so I actually always believe that a four-year university or any type of postgraduate school is really important. This is because not only when you leave high school, you're between the ages of 16 to 18, you're really developing yourself, but getting that independence of not having that small classroom setting or the teacher hand holding you, but really getting to have the decision of making sure, getting the choice of what you want to study and making those choices. And honestly, what I learned, some of the best things was learning how to manage my time, make a schedule, balance my interests, figuring out different things that I could get into. I feel like in high school you just get like math, English, etc., but in college you really get to have a variety of different classes that are available to you. So I think it's really good for students to try to do that. Personally, I feel like I learned more in one semester in law school than I did in 4 years in undergrad.
Really?
Yeah, I think law school was one of the more strenuous, and there's just so much information out there, and the level of responsibility that you get going to law school is 10 times more than you did in undergrad, which is 20 times more, but it's all part of the development process. Now, even if somebody doesn't want to go to university, I also do think that there's an argument for that as well. You know, having that sort of training or figuring out what you want to do while you're 18. I mean, 18 is so young, and there's so much pressure on people to figure out what they want to do. But I think eventually, in order to be successful and really master your craft, you have to get some kind of post-high school education.
Really, post-high school?
Post-high school, right? Because, I mean, think about it. Post-high school is college, so young.
Okay, I get it, because you're going to be 18. So I'll leave it there. You in the comments, you can jump on that. But one thing I do, because I'm like both for and against, you know, university, but like you mentioned that how it really helped you. And you said manage time, scheduling, and in managing time, how to schedule your scheduling and balancing your interests.
Right.
So these are things that I guess I'm assuming that they still apply to you now as an entrepreneur, correct?
Yeah, every day I'm always learning something, and I'm always trying to learn more from things like YouTube videos and different access to things that are out there now. So much education is online now, especially with the current circumstances, which we won't get into. But I think that one of the most important things is always to continue learning. But I always tell my friends this, it's interesting how as we get older, we become more interested in learning. When I was younger, you know, the goal was to get the best grade by doing the least amount of work possible and just kind of, you know, getting through things and trying to kill it that way. But I think that now, when I learn things, I really, really get, you know, involved in it and trying to master that skill. One thing that I really appreciate is that I work a lot with my accountant because so many of my clients ask questions about accounting and taxes. And so for me to be the best legal advisor I could possibly be, I always try to learn as much as I can in different areas that relate to business and law so that I'm able to answer those questions without my clients having to go to different individuals or different professionals for those answers.
And so I also that was a really good point, learning from different backgrounds, different topics. So what about your experience outside of university? You worked at one of the largest banks in the world. I'm not sure what you're going to say, but like, so first off, how has your experience before you started your own business? Like, I want to know, like, during your career, what are some of the things that you learned that you're able to apply now?
Absolutely. I think that every single job that I've had has built me up to the position that I have today. And there's different things that you can learn along the way, whether that be, you know, just practicing the actual work that you're doing and getting the knowledge of that, working with the different types of people, and also working in different types of environments. So my first job was at Goldman Sachs, and that was a very, you know, high, quick-paced, quick delivery, really, really, you know, excited group of people. They expect a lot of hours involved. I really loved it because I really thrive in that type of atmosphere. My managers were great. Everybody was really supportive. So I really enjoyed that a lot. Also, it's a great name to have on your resume, so I'm pretty proud of that. And I think that being in New York City and getting that experience at one of the largest international banks really helped me understand how to have a good work ethic and just deliver. Having high expectations is very important. And then from that, I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York in the Asset Forfeiture Unit. And there I was able to work with some of the best U.S. attorneys there. They were very supportive. I got to learn a lot about asset forfeiture and anti-money laundering and the real in-depth knowledge that it goes into learning about these huge federal cases. It was very different than Goldman Sachs, which was, you know, very quick, fast-paced because the government is technically pretty slow-moving and very thorough. So I got to learn, you know, the whole dynamic of how cases work from start to finish, and I thought that was a really valuable experience as well. Still kind of in the financial crimes area.
So after university and after working at those two companies, you've worked at the bank, Goldman Sachs, worked for a law firm, and you also worked for New York, what was that called?
The U.S. Attorney's Office.
The U.S. Attorney's Office, right? So you've gathered all this experience. And so what made you want to start, Level Up? Like, how did that come into play? How did that come to play?
Yeah, what's funny, when I talk to a lot of my friends now, they're like, you've been talking about doing this since the day that I met you, having your own business. When I was at the last job I was at, which was a large international law firm, I felt like I had done all of the right things to get to where I was. I had all of this experience, my resume was really great, but I didn't really feel a connection to the work that I was doing. I wasn't really feeling like this was where I was supposed to be. I really wanted to have an influence over people that I care about and work with people that I cared about. And so I was really unhappy towards the end of one before I left that position. And I was in a place where I was like, am I ever going to be passionate about what I do? Did I just go through all of that work to really just sit behind a desk and never really feel passionate about what I do? Then a couple of my friends or different people that I know, being in New York, there's so many entrepreneurs, had been asking me for legal advice or to help them with their business. I couldn't at the time because there was a conflict of interest. And so what I did was I decided one day that I was just going to start my own practice. And thinking about that now, it's funny because I don't think that I'm as brave as I was then. I had more of a, what do I have to lose? Let me just try this out. Let me work with a couple people that I know, and then let me just build a website. So it was actually the first time in my life that I'd ever really taken a break. So I had traveled a bit, I was building my website, and I just launched it. I put it on Instagram and said, hey, here it is, Level Up Legal. And my goal in starting that was to work with startups, digital companies, and entrepreneurs with a focus on female founders, and really have that connection as not only their attorney, but a legal advisor, someone who's really part of their team to advise them. Because something that I really did notice with a lot of these startups and businesses is that they did need the legal advice, and they do need the legal advice, but it's always something about the cost or finding the right person. No one ever finds the right accountant or lawyer, so that's always just a really important piece of the business, like you had mentioned, but you have to really find that right person.
So I have a question. So I do want to, in this video, talk about the difference, like first solopreneurs and then startups. And so a solopreneur is someone working by themselves, and I'm going to consider a startup like someone who's developing a team,
right.
Maybe have a few people, so solopreneur work for themselves. So my question is, actually, before we even get to that, take me through that moment of like deciding that you was going to do this. Like, what was, I guess, why did you decide? Was it a moment? Was it like kind of a slow bake decision? Was it a moment? Like, take me through the moment of when you decided. And you've also mentioned that your first step was build a website. Build a website and you just put up and launch. So just take me through that first initial moment of like, okay, I'm going to do this. And how did you transition out?
For me, I always thought that, okay, if I'm not happy right now, I might as well try this. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back to work. It's not a big deal. And so the initial moment was really just, I had a lot of encouragement from the people that I know in my network and my friends that were like, this is actually what you should have always been doing. Sometimes a lot of us, we doubt ourselves and we don't really remember our full vision of what we always wanted to do. And it's nice to hear, the people around you encouraging you. I just decided to start, basically. And I always tell entrepreneurs that the hardest part is actually starting and really putting yourself out there. Starting a business is very vulnerable because you also are opening yourself up to a lot of criticism if you don't succeed. And I also have to say, I didn't really have much of a business plan. I have a service-based business, which I'm really fortunate to have. So I started a website. I have a great network in New York, and it really is mostly referral-based, word of mouth, and I posted a lot on social media to get my business going. Also, I think providing good service really goes around. And another thing that really differentiates me is that I provide flat fees to all the clients. So a lot of these entrepreneurs that maybe wouldn't hire an attorney can really kind of digest the fact of hiring one. So I had an idea of, what I was gonna do and how I was gonna help people, but to be honest, it was just a whim. I think about it now and I'm like, wow, thank God I did that.
Okay, so so here's how my notes kind of look when I do interviews. Like, I ask a question, it's like a whole bunch of space. And so I'm like, I don't know where to take this interview, right? You just gave me like a few different ways I can, take this interview. I really want to, because you service startups and entrepreneurs, I want to talk about your beginning, and I want to see how we can help those people out as well. The first thing that you said, not the first thing, but one of the things that you said was having a full vision, right? And so I was going on Instagram a little bit.
Right.
Digging through. And I saw you did this interview. Nice jacket, nice pink jacket.
Oh, yeah.
And you said like business owners, entrepreneurs should have they shouldn't have a 1-year plan. They should have 6 months plans. All right, so first off, so when you're just getting started, how important is a business plan? You just said you didn't, but how important is one? Should a person startup have one? Like, how should a person getting started, how should they go about tackling their long-term vision?
Absolutely. So everyone's a little different in the type of business they're in. Because mine is service-based, I was able to understand that I would be generating income as I developed. For me, I think that businesses really just, if you're service-based and you're a professional, or you're an entrepreneur, if you're in photography, if you're in marketing, if you have video skill, if you are into graphic design, you have a skill that is so needed that all you really have to do is market yourself appropriately. So I think that when you start really, thinking about a year and 5 years and all of that, you can start to scare yourself. I don't have, my 401k, what's gonna happen if this happens? What's gonna happen if this happens? So I always say that you take everything in different steps. So I always say, start with maybe a 3 to 6 month plan of how you really plan to scale and grow your business, and really focus on that. One of the things to be successful, if you're gonna do these types of goals of a 3 to 6 month plan, is you have to go all in. All of your time has to be very dedicated to your business and making that happen. And you have to be extremely fearless in doing so. So the way I really started was, I had a great network. I would show up to all these different networking events, even if they didn't really feel that relevant to me. And I would just start talking to people and, talking about what I did and what they did, and really asking questions and listening. And I have to say, when networking and you're a service-based business, the key is to listen and not always talk about yourself, as well as ask what you can do for other people, or how you can help bring their business up, not just help yourself. So one of my biggest passions is connecting people. So when I have a client, if I have another client that I know that they could work together and hopefully build business, I always connect them. And that really helps, build my business as well. So it's a lot of different things, but I think that's the best way to start, just start.
So just start, no plan, just go all.
A little bit of a plan. I think you have to have the vision.
Okay.
But I think that you don't have to worry about what's going to be, a year to 5 years down the line. I mean, everybody's in a different situation, and has different responsibilities. But I fortunately was in a position where I, knew that I could really, blow it out of the water, because my service is so different than a lot of other attorneys.
And you're right. I'm actually like that. So part of me agrees and disagrees at the same time.
Yeah.
So I agree, because if you're just getting started, first business, don't know anything, I just say just go at it.
Right.
There's so much you don't know, just go.
Right.
But as you become a little bit more mature, I do say you got to learn how to plan more ahead.
Yeah, I think that this year, actually, that is something that I'm really doing. Now I have a business plan and I'm learning to scale, because now that I've started and I'm really building my business, it's really about the what's next for me. So, I really am so fortunate that my business has grown, but how am I going to scale it? And that's really, now I'm looking into being a little bit more good about having a business plan. But if you're just trying to start, it's really important to start, because I have so many friends with different business plans and they're just sitting on them and they're so great.
I have the perfect book for you. I'll
Yeah,
make
okay,
sure I
I
get
love a
that
good
to you.
book.
Perfect book. It was referred to me, and that is the one book. If someone's looking to scale, I'll refer it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that. Whatever, I'll get that to you. So anyway, wow, you touched on so many things. So first, you don't have a vision, so to speak. You're just kind of going to take it, slowly, 3 months plan at a time, which I do believe at the start is that's the best way of looking at it, because if you don't do that, it's just too grand of a thing. You won't get started. So, wow. Dang, you mentioned networking, flat rates. Where do I go from here? Let's go through networking, because I think networking is what really that's what took my. Of course, that's what most people say. Most people say, like, yo, networking is how my business kind of blew up, but what have you. So do you have somewhat of a networking strategy, even if it's kind of like conscious or subconscious? What's your approach? I guess what's your approach to, like, overall, like, meeting people? You said listen. You said you said listen. Ask if they need help. Okay, I'm not going to restate that. What's your approach to meeting people?
Yeah, so I have to say that, like, networking can sometimes be a triggering word for people, because we've been told so many times that networking is the best way to really build your business. I think for a lot of solopreneurs and startups, that it can be kind of isolating. So building a really strong network around you is really important. The best way to do that, I mean, before was I was showing up to events all of the time. There were so many different founder events and startup events, and I would learn so much. And I'd also watch some YouTube videos, get to know a lot what was going on in the market, watching the news. And one of the things I did was join the female-founded workspace, The Luminary. And the women there were so helpful and connecting me to the right people. And I saw the value in that, because out of the goodness of their own heart, they found me as a new female founder, and they said, oh, look, I have this person that I connect you with. And now where I'm sitting, I do that all the time, and I pay that forward. So I always say to people in networking, the first thing you want to do is have a genuine conversation, and just be as articulate as you can. I think that is number one thing. You don't need to be running around passing out business cards, because then it gets a little too, used car salesman-y. I always, strike up a conversation with the person that I'm sitting next to, whether that's in an event or on an airplane or at a restaurant or at a bartender or anything. I always strike up a conversation. Then what do I do is, once I ask them questions or listen to what their business is about, I think to myself, how could I possibly help this person in their business? At a minimum, I get their contact information, I connect them to the right people, and at that point, they often, ask me a little bit about myself and what I do. Even if they don't need legal services, they always know someone who does. Or when there is a legal question, I'm the first person that pops into their mind. So I think that just building that organic type of marketing where you're really seeking to help people, but also people know what you do, that's really important. Another thing is learn to say what you do in one sentence. Nobody wants to hear a very, dragged on who you're helping, this and that. So some of my mentors taught me that. Say what you do, say your name, what you do, and who you work with very clearly and articulated, and people remember that.
Like I just mentioned, so I can see how you really develop and apply that really naturally. That's really good. And but also I kind of saw, my mistake, because not just now, but it's been a problem since, I would say, when I just got started. So it's going to tie into the next question, but maybe a little bit background. So I got started off in the, I started off doing websites for people, like doing websites. And then it led to graphic design, then led to video production. And then with video, there's so many different types of video. You can do corporate videos, commercials, music videos, right? So there's all types of music video, mostly corporate videos, events. And then it led to like contracting, then led to branding. Then I do these interviews, and then now so now I've come to the point where it's like, what do you really do? And it's like, So right as of making this video, I'm really working on those pitches, what have you.
Yeah.
So but I want to ask you, and we've already answered the question, but I want to ask you more clearly now. You work with a lot of startups, entrepreneurs. Outside of the legal, you've mentioned networking, which is, I think the main point I've taken away from that was listening. All right, that's really the main thing I've taken away. You've mentioned dividing up your plans, all right? So make sure like short-term plans are stacked up over time.
Right.
Those are the two things. And I also want to speak to you, I want to speak to entrepreneurs about pricing.
Right.
Right. So same probably for me, because we're in a service industry, there's no standard price. You know, one lawyer would say, yeah, I charge, $45,000 an hour. Like, what? Like,
$45,000 is a little extreme.
I'm joking. But say for me in the video, bro, it's like, there's no really standard price. And I get it. I get it. So, yeah. And I work with creators, and their pricing sometimes is off the walls. They don't get it sometimes. So how did you develop your pricing? Because you said a flat fee. So what was the thought behind it? How did you develop that? And what advice should people take from how to price their services?
Absolutely. So I developed my pricing because I knew that I was helping founders and startups that need legal advice, but maybe couldn't afford it, and they would be making mistakes or not protecting their business accordingly because of that. So I really have this desire to be a legal advisor to a lot of these clients. So the reason that I developed flat fee pricing is because I actually don't charge for conversations, emails, phone calls, etc. People today are so educated, and a lot of information is on the internet. So when I'm drafting a contract for an entrepreneur, I only think it's fair that included in the price is a conversation to me walking through what that contract means and how they're to use it. I also think transparency is really important, so I always charge the flat fee up front, and they know that they're not going to be hit with a big bill afterwards. I think that for lawyers, that's huge because, when you're thinking about hiring a lawyer, how many people tell you, oh man, it's going to be like 10 grand and you're going to be hit with all these bills. Every phone call, every email is going to cost you something. So I think eliminating that is very huge for founders, because people who are raising money or who could be on a tight budget or who are bootstrapping their business need to account for every dollar while also making sure their business is protected. So what I do is I basically think about how many hours that it would probably take me to do the actual work, the drafting, and a little bit of conversation here and there. Now I'm extremely lenient with my time because I really do value that connection. And so I think that is how I build so many clients. So from the inception of my business to now, I have over 80 clients. And I never actually charge, or I very rarely charge, a retainer, which is basically a large lump sum that I deduct from, and then I can continue doing work. I charge everything up front. And my clients always return because they know, they've seen the work that I've done, they can trust me, they know they're gonna get the best service. So I didn't really have to do these retainers. I don't have to chase after clients for bills. And so that actually really helped me streamline my business. And so with pricing, I think you have to kind of figure out what really works best in your industry and what type of clients you wanna serve. Now, if there is a client that has a huge litigation or a trademark or something going on where they really need to be in court for that, I actually tell them, you should go to a larger law firm that has more resources to represent you in a case that is worth so much. I really act more as an in-house attorney or an outsourced attorney for these businesses and entrepreneurs. I do some negotiations about, companies and withdrawals and transfers, etc. But usually they're amicable and the parties really agree, and they're just making sure that their corporate documents are in line with that.
That's really detailed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And so it's funny because I'm doing a music video. I'm filming a music video next week.
For who? Are you allowed to say?
For me.
Oh, okay.
So I'm all right. I speak Japanese, right? And I never really knew how to connect, because I never knew how to use that language, utilize it in my business. So I was like, wait. So I was like, long story short, I'm doing a music video. Check that out. Link in the description box below. And working with a videographer. And one thing I've learned about creatives is that, or just startup entrepreneurs, is that they don't make it easy to buy sometimes. Their journey to the purchase is very it's not the best. And what I mean by that is you might want to buy from someone, but they don't know how to even set up their invoice. They don't know how to explain their prices, right? So let's just say this, because we're all entrepreneur startups here watching this. I'm coming to you, all right? Let's just say, hey, Shermin, I want a copyright. What is the journey from me inquiring to actually, the actual, I guess, payment?
Right. I think one of the most important things is that journey, because what you're doing at that point is you're getting someone to trust you based on how you tell them you're going to do something, and them paying you to do that, and expecting a result. So really having that trust factor and knowledge is important. So what I do is if someone reaches out to me, which is usually the way it goes, I send them, I ask them a little bit about themselves, I tell them a little about myself, and I usually set up a 15-minute or 30-minute phone consultation where they tell me about what they're looking for, and I advise them accordingly about what they're asking for, and then maybe some more. I set up an email describing what I'm going to do, setting up the pricing structure, and really letting them digest that. I'll usually send up a follow-up if I don't hear back from them, and then I go ahead and once they agree, engagement letter, invoice, and then I go ahead and get started. That has really just been, the method that works for me. But that initial point where you're really talking about the services you provide, that's key. And also, in the end, if you don't deliver, word of mouth goes around. So for people who are artists or in, the video space, I think it's a little bit more relaxed. A lot of people use Venmo, or I'll do that. But again, it's credibility. You have to make sure that you set up your business, because there's a difference between a random freelancer and somebody who's made their freelancing an actual business. I also have to say, try not to undercharge. Especially female founders, we tend to do that. We really end up undercharging or undervaluing our services. Or, at least if somebody is not so sure about you, give them a little bit of an initial taste of what you do at a reduced fee. And then, if once you build that rapport, you can charge, what you actually deserve. But overall, don't undervalue yourself. I always say it's better to give out a little bit of free service than a discounted service. So if someone is like, oh, I have a question about this, can I call you about it? I say sure, and then when they actually need me to hire me on, I charge my worth. I don't, go here and there with it.
So first, I want to go back into just to recap, I guess the journey to the sale really. One, you want to build the trust. So right. When people come to you, they most likely already have some established trust with you. And then you do the first 15-minute consultation so that you can get to learn about what they need. And from that, you can extract information and tell how you're going to service them. And then you also attach it, and you tell them what you can do and how much it costs. And if they agree, then you send in all the documents as well as invoice. It's a very simple step. A lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't have that.
QuickBooks is amazing. Honestly, it totally legitimizes your business.
QuickBooks. I use PayPal on QuickBooks. And also you mentioned Venmo, whatever. No, sorry, no. I don't know. No, that's not it.
Yeah.
Stick to for me, when I was asked to do that, I'm like, listen, if you're going to be, stick to the professional payment methods. No Cash App, all that stuff. And they also said charging your value. That's a problem that not just startups have, just people in general. They say if I charge this much, then maybe I may not get the sale. People don't want to work with me. And a lot of sometimes it may even be not understanding self-worth. Am I worth it? Are my services worth it? Maybe not understanding what you bring to the table. So what are some things people can do to first off identify the correct price for their service and then charge the amount?
Absolutely. I think that figuring out your hourly rate is important. So for me, when I think about how long something is going to take me, I usually, I'm like, okay, this is going to take me 1 to 2 hours. This is how much I'm going to charge as a flat fee up front. If I'm lucky, it takes me a little less. Most of the time, it takes me a little bit more. but at least I know that I'm getting that, and I usually charge that up front. I think that time is really important when you are running your own business, because the last thing you want to be doing is chasing invoices at the end of the day. Also, like I said, it really, creates a transparency. So the startups I work with or the founders are like, okay, I know the cost. I promise them, and I tell them I'm not going to charge them anything more unless it really goes beyond the scope of the work. Then I will tell you and we'll discuss it. And I've stuck to my word on that. I've never sent out any type of random invoice. So when you figure out your hourly, I always say that's how you can kind of determine what you should be charging. Now, this doesn't say that when there is, a startup or a founder that I really admire, I really feel like, they're trying very hard to build something that's helpful for the community, the environment, or anything that's going on in the world today, I will offer them, more of the services than, whatever I charged for. But I do that at, free of cost, because I really have a value or connection with that business. So again, it depends, but, fortunately, I've been lucky enough to build business that way, and that's how the referrals really come through.
So we spoke a lot about how to, build a business, how to start up, but I want to get into the legal side of what people, how people can actually establish a business or build a business. What are some of the legal things that they should be concerned about or focused on? I want to talk about some of the legal aspects of starting up. So first thing is, what are some of the, I guess, let's say 3 main considerations. Let's go with a solopreneur, someone just brand spanking new. What are the 3 main considerations that a solopreneur should have when it comes to their legal startup?
Starting their business, yeah. So when a freelancer is making the pivot to actually really develop their brand and their business, the first thing that I would say that they need to do is file for a legal entity. Usually it's going to be an LLC or an S Corp. And this is really important, because what you want to do is make sure that you separate liability from your personal assets and your business. That's when you are a service-based business, and if we always think of the worst case scenario as a lawyer. If someone is going to sue you, you don't want them to have access to all your personal assets. By setting up a legal entity or an LLC or an S Corp, you basically are able, if anybody is to sue you, it's only your business money, your business bank account, and everything related to that business, which is separate from your personal. I think that's one of the biggest things that people should do first. Also, it's beneficial from a tax perspective, because the income that you're earning isn't taxed as personal income if you leave it in the business or file as an S Corp. Now, I'm not an accountant, which is why I said I love speaking to my accountant on this, because him and I often work together and advise entrepreneurs on the best way that they can set up their business, either an LLC or an S Corp, and how they're really going to save money. For solo entrepreneurs, the biggest question is how am I not going to get hit with this huge tax bill? I have all these friends that tell me that at the end of the year they had to pay all these taxes. How do I structure my business accordingly? So set up your legal entity, talk to an accountant about that. 2 is get yourself some insurance. One of the things that a lot of freelancers have to deal with is whether the venue that they're potentially working at or the company they're working with is going to indemnify them or waiver liability. Indemnify means that if anything goes wrong with the services that they provide and they get sued, who's going to be liable for that lawsuit? That's one thing. And whether they're going to be liable for everything that happens. It's always at some fine print in these types of contracts for service providers or people who are dealing with data. Another thing that I always say third would be to develop your own contracts, your own service contract. With everything that really protects you as, with your business and your service provider. Also, it just looks very professional that when you have a client that you're working with, you have your contracts lined up. You send over a quick, short 1-page NDA. This is going to keep, whatever we're talking about confidential. Then you have, a service contract. Now, don't have a huge 20-page service contract that's going to make people feel like, ooh, I don't really want to work with this person, because clearly, they have a lot going on, or there's a lot of, red flags going up. I always also say to entrepreneurs, know who you're working with. So if you are a videographer and HBO is hiring you as a freelancer, you're not going to send them your contract, right? They are a huge entity. They're going to send you their contract, and you're going to have to hire a lawyer to really read through that and understand how, you know, that contract really impacts you and your business. There's always a balance, I tell business owners, between, you know, making sure that you're protecting yourself and not missing the opportunity by getting too much into the weeds of, you know, what's the details of the contract. Read the contract, speak to a lawyer, understand the contract so you know what you're getting into. But when it comes to huge, you know, deals and great opportunities, unless, you know, you don't over negotiate, these opportunities come, you know, very, you know, except for some people, not so often. So just know who you're dealing with. And those are, you know, some of the main things I would say.
So the main thing is first, set up a legal entity.
Legal entity.
Then there's insurance.
Get your insurance.
And then it's develop your own contract.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think you really touched up on everything. Let's see. Set up a legal entity. I can go into why it's important to set up a legal entity, but we're just not going to do that in this video. I mean, some of the benefits of it. Would you want to talk about that? Or?
I think I got into it, just like separating your assets.
And I just want to say one thing. Set up a legal entity is good for other business owners. Like, some business owners don't want to work with other people who don't have their business set up. Like,
absolutely.
That deters me when I see someone that doesn't have a legal structure, because it's like, you know, obviously, if you've been in business long enough, some way, somehow, someone has screwed you over. So it's, LLC is, or getting some sort of legal structure is important for other businesses to want to work with you. Also,
going back to invoices, you know, if somebody is sending you a check to your personal name, it just doesn't look as buttoned up. If you have a, you know, your business bank account, it's also really just helpful from a tax perspective, just to keep your things organized. Overall, set up a legal entity.
And insurance, very important. Have your own insurance. Some people, anyway, and then develop your own contracts. So when it comes to developing your own contracts, is it something that you personally write, or should you work with a lawyer to help you draft these contracts? So if I want to develop my own contract, how do I start that process?
So a lot of solo entrepreneurs, there's two ways that they go about it. The more preferred way for someone working with me is if they don't have a contract and I can start it from scratch for them. A lot of times though, most solopreneurs have pulled, you know, contracts or found some stuff online. Like I said, people today are really smart. There's lots of information online. They go to different websites, they pull different things. They go to LegalZoom and they put together some kind of like contract of some sort that they send out. And sometimes it takes that other entity to, you know, point out a lot of red line or an issue to pop up for them to be like, you know what, I really need my contracts reviewed. Actually, I know we weren't supposed to talk about this, but during COVID, that was a really big thing because a lot of people were, you know, breaking promises, getting out of deals, especially in the event space industry, which is one of my main, you know, clients. So that was a really huge, you know, issue that was going on of events canceling. You know, vendors pulling out, all of that, and how is the contract they entered into, you know, how do the refunds work, how does the payment work, you know, who's liable for what now? So that huge question mark, if you had a really buttoned up contract, then that was really helpful. So I think, you know, the situation we're in has really helped people realize that.
I'm actually one of those people with a 13-page contract.
You can.
But a policy, because I've learned that there's so many. When you work with someone like one-off, 1 page, 2 page contracts are fine. Like when you work with someone like long term, like longer contracts, retainers, that's what I have a long.
I would say for you, there's a way to keep it under 7 by being it could be thorough under 7 and also just put it into 2 columns because you probably, if you know certain people you want to work with, to get a huge contract, they might go with someone who's just they think it's easier to work with.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Okay. So that's that. Let's go for someone, now let's go, before we even get to the startup, let's say someone transitioning in. Before their startup, they're hiring their first person. So I like to insert myself into these interviews, right? I just sent out a contract with someone, an employment contract with someone just yesterday, right? But what are some of the things that someone has to consider from a legal perspective when it comes to hiring?
Absolutely. I think the first thing you need to consider is whether they're going to be a 1099 or whether they're going to be an employee. Okay. So if they're going to be an independent contractor, then you want to make sure that they're able to set their own hours, that you're paying them at least the hourly minimum wage in the state that you're located. And you do want to record their hours because you need to pay them overtime for any hours that they work over 40 hours a week. There's a couple other things that you need to have in an independent contractor contract, but also another thing is that a lot of states don't require you to provide break times or other things like that. Employment agreements, on the other hand, are a little bit more robust in the fact that you really have to go in line with the state that they're working in, and you also potentially need to make sure your legal entity is set up as a foreign qualification in that state which you're hiring in or you're making money in. So that's another thing more startups consider versus entrepreneurs, but those are two things to be, really consider. I always say, make sure you have somebody record their hours. And also, if you're providing somebody services and say you're working on a flat fee basis or a monthly fee, you should also be writing down everything you're doing and how long it's taking. From the opposite perspective, if I've had, clients that were, paid me a monthly fee and they sometimes forget all the work that I did for them. So I will give them, a monthly Excel spreadsheet or like a little bit of a hourly thing about what I did so that they could say, okay, wow, she did a lot, and there's never a question. So I think it's a good general rule of thumb. And when you are basically putting someone's duties together, I would think that it would be important to have a basic general scope of work, of expectations, and then in your contract, what happens if those expectations aren't met? Especially in the industry of website development and app development. That has been a really hot area where there'll be potential services that are supposed to be rendered, and that's not really what's happening. Also, app development takes longer than expected. There's always like glitches, That's been a really interesting area of contracts I've had to deal with.
No, that definitely makes sense in a lot of industries. I also have that as well, like what happens if I film someone and the audio isn't good. So I have that in my contracts as well, which it protects the clients. All right, so we spoke about how to build a business, some of the things that you should consider. We spoke about some of the legal components as in insurance, setting up a legal entity, and develop your own contracts as a solopreneur. We also spoke about employment contracts. Mm-hmm. We just had a behind-the-scenes session. All right. Dios mío. And then I want to get into startups now. Startups, like maybe a few bustling group of people. What are certain things that startups should consider with illegal? What are things startups should consider?
Yeah. So besides employment contracts, protecting their concept with an NDA, and also potentially a non-compete with their employees. Another thing that they really have to figure out is equity, how their business is split up with the ownership. And my main question I always get is for startups that are, raising funds or raising their first round of funding. That is usually when they really think about getting a lawyer, because when you start raising money, you have to have your business formation documents really lined up, which is if you're a corporation, your bylaws, your shareholder agreements, the people you start with, and then what you're seeking, the amount that you're looking for, what potential percentage that might be in the company, and whether you're going to raise on a SAFE or a convertible note. I always recommend that startups that are pretty new to inception raise on a SAFE agreement, and that's a whole other video day.
I was going to ask what that is, but we can research that.
And so that's really one of the main questions that I ask. You want to make sure that you have all of those documents really in line when you are seeking investment, because it is, you're going out there, you're speaking to investors. The one thing that you don't want to do is go out to investors, you're using your pitch deck, you have this great idea, and then finally when an investor comes to you and has said, okay, yeah, I'm ready, what are you asking for? And you don't have your ducks in a row or your data room lined up. And so you're really more reactively scrambling and trying to get everything organized, when if you've had that really prepared on the onset, you'd be able to keep that momentum going, and it's more likely that an investor will invest in your company because they already like you if they believe in you. They've already showed some interest. You've already, done the pitch deck. They believe in you as a founder. The last thing you want to do is eliminate any of that confidence in your business by scrambling around for your data room, your documents, your financials, and all the things that they need usually before they invest. Another key thing I would say, if that you're a startup looking for investment, don't give an NDA to investors. It's kind of like a little rule of thumb. I always say, if you are sharing information with someone who is your equal or below, give an NDA. If you are asking, don't give an NDA, because you're asking them for something. They're going to be like turned off a little bit. Investors want to see what you're about, and that's really the main thing startups are doing right now is seeking funding, and that's what I provide services for primarily.
Fantastic. So I do want to wrap up here. We've spoken through a lot of topics.
Yeah.
If you stay through this whole interview, I really appreciate. Oh, man, that's one thing I forgot to say in the very beginning. We have timestamps. But if you stay through this whole interview, I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned a lot. But a final couple questions I like to ask all of my guests. Right. First is patience or urgency?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I had to actually really develop and understand that I always had a false sense of urgency, is what I call it.
Okay.
I always, feel like I was racing for a long period of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that, realizing that not everything has to be urgent, but more perfect is actually the way that I really like to do that. So I guess I would say patience is really important, and it's a harder one to develop.
Not what's most important. What do you apply most?
Oh, what do I apply? Urgency.
Urgency. Why do people have problems saying the urgency? I'm very urgent myself.
I am urgency. Yes.
Urgent. Okay. Let's see. This is a new one that I've kind of developed. Let's see. I want you. Okay. Before I do that one, I want you to go back in time to where Shermin was in University of Washington.
Yeah.
Just getting started. Right? You just went to your dorm. You lived at a dorm?
I was in a sorority.
Okay, so you lived in your sorority house, right? You're just packing up, just putting your clothes out, you're packing in your clothes. And then you're by yourself, and then your sorority sisters are there right now.
Yeah.
Right, so you're just in your room by yourself. And then, quick flash, Shermin right now comes in and has the bill. You have 30 seconds, 30 seconds to say something to that Shermin right now. What do you say?
Don't doubt yourself. Know that you have so many strengths, that you are a confident person, that as long as you keep your vision straight and know who you are, you will get to what you want. And everything always turns out okay in the end. It's so stressful being young. I swear, we're always like, oh, what's going to happen? That was a tough question,
Okay.
so that's what I would say, I guess.
All right, cool. So now you open back, now you're back in the present, right? So now you're still here, right? You're still here with me. And, but I want you to, although you're here with me right now, I want you to think about someone. Mm-hmm. All right, don't say their name, all right? But just think about someone, all right? Hopefully not me.
Yeah.
Okay. You think you have someone in mind?
Yes, I have a couple people in mind, I think, right now.
But think about one person that's close to you.
Okay.
You have a person that's close to you?
Yes.
What's something that you always wanted to say to them, but you never said to them?
Ooh, I hope they don't know who I'm talking about. I would say to them that I always tell women, so it's a woman, that know your worth and always put yourself in the other person's shoes. So, for example, I can actually give an example today. What happened is another attorney, she was telling me, oh, should I be doing this? I don't want to turn this client off. And I said, stop. They should be worrying about turning you off because you know your worth and you know who you are. Now, women are always really good about giving advice, and a lot of times we're not the best at taking it. That's why I think women work so well together, because we're always, pushing each other to be better. So I would say to, honestly, most of the women that I know in my life, know your worth and put the shoe in the other foot and think about yourself from a higher point of view versus below somebody.
And then last question I like to ask all of my...
These are hard questions.
Really? No, it's introspective.
On the spot.
Yeah, but you handled it like a champ. That's
okay.
Good. And last question, New York in one word.
The best city in the world. I can't even.
Nope. I already had that. I already had that answer.
Oh my god.
The best city, and that's five words.
Everything.
Everything.
The city is everything.
Okay, so I'll set that. First up, would you mind telling this camera how people can find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Shermin Lakha. You can find my website, LvlUpLegal.com. I'm on Instagram and via email at Shermin@LvlUpLegal.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it. This is a full scope of how to start your business. Some of the little details, some of the larger things, again, creating a vision, networking with people, knowing your worth, the details and how to actually, the buying and the selling process. So these are all things that you can apply. The legal aspects of it. Are you really protecting yourself? Are you really protecting yourself, right? So ask yourself that, if you're doing all these things, you want to have the proper protection. If you're seeking investment, you want to have all your ducks in order. So these are all things that you should definitely have in order right now or seek to have done for you. So if you haven't already, check out Shermin. She works virtually, so she can work with you anywhere, wherever you are. And so she got me hooked. She got me hooked. She scared me behind the camera, so she got me. She's gonna need some fear tactics on you, but get in contact with her. Listen, I do not prep anybody for my interviews, and that's how I know that they're the real deal. Shermin is the real deal. So make sure you get in contact. Make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and leave a thumbs up. Remember, be great. Cheers.